How's it going, everybody? My name is Brandon Yu, and welcome back to another ESkate review. Today we're going to be reviewing the Lycaon GR. Lycaon Board is actually a new budget electric skateboard company, and they were kind enough to send me their Lycaon GR board to review for free. Just, to be clear here, as always on this channel, I always try to give honest, true reviews about my experiences, about the pros and cons of the boards that I use. So before I go to my review, I'll actually just show you some quick unboxing footage that I took when I first got the board. So I'll see you in a bit. I think it's pronounced Lycaon board. Alright. You ready to see this? Woo! So here for now. Alright, and this is back to the remote, which is a pretty cool looking remote. So it's pretty decently heavy. This seems to be a switch. There's 3 buttons here. A skate tool with an Allen wrench. And charger, I assume, yeah. Oh, this is a small charger. Hub motor caps, USB, micro USB for charging, and this looks like a light that you can attach to your board. Okay, and of course a user manual. So this is the board. I'm gonna take it out of this plastic wrap. This is a clean looking board. Alright, Lycaon board. Alright, welcome back. One thing I did want to talk about from the unboxing is this light. This light isn't that good. It comes in a box, has 3 different modes, but it's not that bright. You can attach it to the back truck of your board, and it should, tell the people, all the cars in the back that, they're there, but I would definitely invest in a better lighting solution than just relying on this. So as a quick overview of the board, spoiler alert, I do actually really like this board. I was excited to receive this board at first based on the advertised specs on their website, and upon receiving it, upon riding it, I actually had a pretty good experience. So let's just get right into this review. I want to first start talking about the design and hardware of the board. First of all, the board is 18.9 pounds according to the website. It is on the heavier side, but when I was using it, I really had no problem with that. I was able to actually roll it on its wheels whenever I was carrying it, sort of like a suitcase. And because it uses hub motors, it free rolled pretty well. And carrying it wasn't such a big deal, so the weight's not an issue. The deck has a very nice looking design, and it is a stiff 8-ply deck, but when I was riding it, the stiff deck actually did a lot to absorb a lot of vibrations on the road that actually made the ride feel very comfortable. I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit more later on. The Lycaon board actually uses metal enclosures, which is actually a huge surprise because most budget boards opt to use plastic enclosures, and those get the job done. They protect all the electronics pretty well. But for a budget board to have metal enclosures makes this board feel a lot more high quality than their competitors. And with the metal enclosures is actually a rubber seal that lines along the metal enclosure, along the deck, and this actually acts as very good water resistance. Funny story is, during my range test of this board, I actually ran through a board deep puddle, and that got me completely all soaked, that got the board completely all soaked, but because it's sealed, there was no water that ever actually got into the board, and the board was completely fine. I kept riding it for another couple of miles and got home, it dried off, no issues. So if you have this board and you're ever caught in like a watery situation, most likely you should be fine. Just, I wouldn't personally, and I wouldn't recommend you ride it in rain all the time. That's just not safe, but you should be fine if you happen to run over like big puddles and stuff. So I mentioned before that this is a hub motor board, and what that means is that compared to belt motor boards, they are a lot more quiet, and in many cases they are less torquey. I'll talk about my rideability experience later on, but for the most part, torque wasn't really an issue for me. These hub motors do get hot over time if you're continuously running them. In the box, they do come with these open motor caps. I didn't actually have a chance to install these and test these out myself, but if I did, I think this would have helped with heat dissipation a lot. There was an issue I did run into that is related to sort of heat and power usage. I will talk about that later in the video. Continuing on with the hub motors, they do have replaceable urethane, so if your urethane starts ripping or tearing, which didn't happen to me in my maybe 40-50 miles of riding this, there were no tearing so far, so these urethane sleeves seem to be pretty good. And of course, with hub motors, there is a lot of more free roll capability compared to belt motors. You're able to push kick this a bit better than you would if you had a belt driven board. As for the ESC, or the electronic speed controller, they use the Lycaon ESC. I actually asked the Lycaon board why they don't use the Hobbywing ESC, and according to them, they said that the Lycaon ESC actually has better torque as well as better high-end stability, reliability, and high-end torque. So I don't know exactly how true that is because I don't have a Hobbywing ESC board. I've tried them before and I know the Hobbywing is smooth, but the Lycaon one, in my experience for this board, was actually completely fine. So moving on to the remote, this actually is a very nice remote. When I picked it up, I immediately liked it. Like, it feels really good, it fits well in your hand, and the throttle feels really smooth. On the remote, there are 4 acceleration modes. There's low, medium, high, and high plus, or rather L, M, H, and H plus. And with that, there's actually also a completely separate 4 braking modes, which is actually the first time I've ever seen that in any board, which is actually really good because it allows the user to adjust their braking to their liking, if they want smoother brakes, if they want harder brakes. And there are 4 different braking modes, which is basically B1 through B4. The remote also tells you your board and battery life, which is very nice. A lot of remotes don't tell you like how much battery there's left on the remote, let alone even tell you the battery on the board at all. Along with that, they also tell you the speed as well as an odometer to tell you how far you've gone for this trip as well as a lifetime trip. For the model that I have right now, it only tells you in kilometers, but they said they would ship out remotes that are in miles per hour in the future. Finally, for hardware, the batteries that they use are 10S3P 18650 cells. And with these batteries, they advertised a mileage of 23 plus or minus 2 miles, as well as a top speed of around 26 miles per hour. And spoiler alert, I more or less got these advertised results, which I'll explain in a few minutes. So let's move on to rideability and general comfort of riding this board. So when I first got the board, the trucks actually came extremely tight. I had to loosen it a lot before it was rideable at all. Even then, I still felt like it was a bit tight. I think I could have loosened it a bit more, but it is personal preference. You will probably find a nice balance of how loose or tight your trucks are mixed in with the alleged top speed of 26 miles per hour. And you might need a bit more tightness when you're going faster. So I mentioned the stiff deck earlier and how it was actually very comfortable, but when I rolled over basically tiled ground, I actually felt it was more comfortable than my boosted board, which has a flexi loaded deck. And that actually surprised me. I'm not even kidding here. Like, I was rolling through all these tiles and I'm like, wow, my feet don't actually feel that tired compared to if I was riding my boosted board. I actually felt that this stiff deck felt more comfortable rolling over tiles than my flexi deck. But it's not all good. Whenever I was rolling over like cracks or sidewalk lines, you know what I mean? Whenever I hit those, it would sort of push my rear wheels up a little bit. And I didn't really like that. And I think that was because the deck was stiff, so it didn't have enough room to flex like over the cracks. But I think you get used to it over time. If you're used to riding stiff decks, that's something you just have to get used to. And sort of related to this issue, sometimes when I rolled over big cracks, like those sidewalk cracks, sometimes I felt like the motors would cut out for like the smallest microsecond. Again, I feel like this could be an issue with hub motors sometimes, where like I lose traction with the ground and I sort of lose that control. But that could be an issue with the board if other hub motor boards don't have this issue. But again, it was very minor. It was like not a problem at all. Like it was literally a microsecond, and then I would keep going. So it wasn't actually a big issue. So talking about acceleration, braking, and control, I honestly think that the only worthwhile mode for me specifically to ride in is the H plus mode, because I like torque. I like having that torque if I ever need to accelerate fast or brake fast. And it is a hub motor board, so it's not going to have the same amount of torque as like a boosted board, but it has enough power to launch if you needed to, but that's only available in the H plus mode. On H mode, it feels a bit slow, but it is smooth if you're comfortable with smoother accelerations. So H mode would be fine if you're that person and if you want to maybe save some range. And that's the same with all the other modes, the low, medium, and of course high modes. Those all have smoother accelerations. H plus, however, has a bit of jerkiness to it. It has a strong kick in the beginning when it first accelerates, but then smoothens out to a very controllable acceleration on the high end. However, when you are stopped at like stoplights, it is a bit difficult to like sort of inch forward a bit, because when you push forward, it might like sort of jerk you forward a little bit. Not by a lot. It's not like your board's gonna go flying, but it is something you have to prepare your body for, like sort of lean into an acceleration when you're accelerating on H plus mode. Again, I mentioned before that the remote has 4 different braking modes, which is actually really cool. My personal preference is the strongest braking mode, again, like I am a pretty crazy rider. I like the highest torque, I like the strongest braking, I want to have that power. But if you're not comfortable with strong brakes a lot of time, the lower modes are available to you for smoother braking. I wouldn't say the fourth braking mode is jerky at all. Like it's still very smooth as long as you're nice with the wheel, but it might be more comfortable for you for those slower deceleration times. So I already mentioned how much I do like the remote, and it does display a lot of information, but I didn't mention that the remote and the board has cruise control. And so my thing with cruise control is that I almost never use it. I would rather prefer to have direct control of my acceleration and braking, so I basically never use cruise control. But for the review, I did test the cruise control. This is the first board that I own with cruise control, and I can say for a fact that I hate cruise control at high speeds. It's just scary. I don't want to be going like really fast, like maybe over even over 15-20 miles per hour on cruise control, because to turn off cruise control, you're gonna, for this remote at least, you can basically do anything on the remote, either pull back on the brake, hit a button, but in that moment you're doing that, it switches from an automatic acceleration back to your control, so it sort of like jerks into a different braking mode. However, there was a use case where I didn't actually mind using cruise control, and that's at speeds lower than 15 or 10 miles per hour. Because at those speeds, you know, you're not going too fast that if you fall that you're gonna like get severely injured. That's a nice cruising speed that I can comfortably turn on cruise control and just sort of glide, take in the view, and whenever I want, I'll just pull back on the brake or hit a button and I'll slowly slow down. So at slower speeds, I like cruise control. At higher speeds, no go, don't do it. I won't do it. So moving on to my real world specification tests and my experiences with numbers. For top speed, I actually hit over 26 miles per hour. I ended up hitting 27 miles per hour on my GPS app. Now keep in mind, I was at full battery as well as H+ mode. I believe you can only hit the speed if you're in H+ mode. I think you might, for H mode, I think it's around maybe 24, 25 miles per hour. And you do have to have a decent amount of battery left because there is voltage sag, so you will lose your top speed and acceleration as your battery dies down. And so with that, I did do a range test. And in that range test, I did about 21 miles, 22 miles. I believe my board started dying or completely dying around 21.5, and I had to push kick the last 0.5 miles back home, which wasn't too bad because, again, it is a hub motor board, so push kicking was fine. But this 21 miles was also sort of at like an average slow speed because I was taking it easy. I was riding along the water, sort of taking in the view as I was riding. But there were a couple stretches here and there that I did go full speed and did like sort of launch. So it wasn't like an only chill ride. If it was only chill ride, I think I would have been able to hit that 23 mile mark for advertised range. Or if I was on a lower mode, say like H or even M. So I did bring it to a NYC e-boarding group ride. So since I knew at the time that this board was a 20-mile board, basically, I went to this group ride basically no problem. These group rides usually have charge spots every 7 miles or so. I ended up not really having to charge that much. I only charged at one charge spot for maybe like an hour or so. And then for the second charge spot, I didn't charge at all because I knew I still had range enough for me to get home after the ride. That day we rode about 15 miles and I think my battery still had about half battery, including those charging spots that I had. So keep in mind that this board isn't gonna be a board that you're gonna be bringing to rides that are more than around 20 miles. I knew this ride wasn't gonna be like more than 20 miles, so I felt comfortable to bring it. But this board has the smallest charger ever. It's actually a 4 to 6 hour charge time with the charger that they include in the box. That's probably one of the biggest cons of this board is that it doesn't charge faster. But they did say, I did message them, and they did say that they are coming out with the fast charger within the coming weeks, and that'll improve this board a lot. So during this ride, I also encountered this issue. This is actually a pretty decently large issue that I think is important to let you guys know. During the ride, we went up and down 2 separate suspension bridges in New York City, the Williamsburg and the Manhattan Bridge, I believe. In 2 separate occasions, shortly after we left the bridge, we were riding a couple blocks in, my board, my remote actually cut off. Like I had no more control of the board. And in both these cases, luckily I wasn't going too fast, and I think one of them I was able to foot brake it out, but it did completely cut off, and I had to turn on and off the board, and then it could keep running again. I messaged Lycaon board about this, and they said that it was a current issue. That because I was going up a steep hill at a decently fast speed, I was sort of overdoing the current. for what the board can handle. So I feel like that does make sense. If you're pushing too much power to a board, that will happen, but I feel like there could be a safer way to implement that. Maybe warn me through the remote if like I'm about to shut off, and not just like shut me off. But you know, if you have this board, just keep that in mind. You don't want to be going up into incredibly steep hills at a high speed. If you're gonna do it slowly, and you should be fine. And also keep in mind, my board was also like really hot. I feel that could have been an issue too. We were riding for a while at that point. The motor's hot, and I'm pushing the board to do even more. So in normal use cases, this shouldn't be an issue. This shouldn't happen to you. But that is an issue. That is a problem that I do want to make sure that you know about before you buy this board, or if you have this board. So to wrap this all up, the great things about this board is that it has very great specs. It has very competitive top speeds, competitive range. At least on paper, it's actually better than my boosted board. The remote is very nice. I really like all the information that the LED screen displays to me, as well as the different acceleration and braking modes. I like having those options. I like that they're giving us those options. The board's build quality is very good. It uses metal enclosures. It's rubber water sealed, and feels like a nice board when you're riding it. And of course, like most hub motor boards, it also free rolls, which I really appreciate. Having a lot of belt driven boards, I like free rolling boards if I ever needed to push. Like that one time I did run out of battery for that 0.5 mile. For the cons, it charges incredibly slowly. You definitely don't want to be stuck far away from home and needing to charge for 4 to 6 hours just to get home. It is on the heavier side, but again, I mentioned before, it wasn't like that heavy that it was like a big issue. But if you're looking for a more portable board, this is around 19 pounds. So just keep that in mind. A lot of the skate hardware, especially the trucks, did come a bit tighter than they should have. So when you receive it, you might have to adjust the hardware here and there just to get the board to your liking. And they do include a skate tool in the box, so you'll have all the tools that you need. So that shouldn't be an issue, just keep that in mind. And then there are good and bad things depending on your own personal preference. So I would say stuff like the deck, it is stiff. If you like stiff decks, that's good for you, but if you like flexi decks, maybe this isn't the one. The acceleration and braking, it uses a Lycaon ESC. A lot of people don't like the Lycaon ESC, but some people do. You might prefer Hobby Wing, you might like Lycaon. That's on you. I can't tell you what's exactly better because it is a personal preference. Hub motors can be good or bad. It doesn't have as much torque as some belt-driven boards, but it has enough that I think satisfies me. But you might be someone that likes that torque, you like that noise from the belt motor, so you might not like hub motor boards. But this is cheap. You're getting usually hub motor boards are cheaper, so that's the sacrifice you take to get a cheaper board. Also, finally, cruise control. Cruise control, I either hate it or I don't mind it, but you might like it. That's your personal preference. So finally, should you buy the Lycaon GR? Should you buy the Lycaon board? Honestly, I think it's a very great budget electric skateboard. It has the power and the range to do whatever it is that you need to do on an electric skateboard, whether it is to travel a couple miles or even going for a long joyride. It can do it, and it can do it fast. 26, 27 miles per hour, that's no joke. That's a lot faster than a lot of boards on the market right now. So I would say the Lycaon board is actually a very solid competitor to other budget electric skateboards in the market, in the industry right now. Since around this price, many other popular boards might not have as much range as the Lycaon board, might not go as fast as the Lycaon board. There are others that, match it or go a bit over, but sacrifice on other things. You just have to do the research on what you want more, and you have to know your own personal preferences about what specific specifications you gravitate towards. So I do recommend this board. It is a nice board. Right now, the price is $549. I don't know, that might change. But regardless, I do have a 3% off code that will be in the description. So that you'll get the board a bit more cheaper, which makes this an even more competitive board for the price. So that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this review. Hopefully I answered all the questions that you've had about this review. If you have any other questions, feel free. Don't be afraid to leave me comments. I look at all my comments. I respond to as many as I can to the best of my ability. So feel free to ask me any questions that you have. Any comments, feedback, etc. If you did like this video, feel free to like the video. If you do want to see more stuff like this, feel free to subscribe or hit the notification bell. I do appreciate that. But otherwise, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.